Good evening and welcome to the Thursday night edition of PAPA, Public Affairs Public Access Television Show on Houston Media Source. Tonight we'll be talking about prison reform. But first I'd just like to say something about Houston Media Source, the organization that provides this service. If you have a non-commercial public affairs issue that you would like to bring to a more wide audience in Houston, contact Houston Media, hmstv.org on the web, and they'll give you all directions on how you can learn to produce your own shows on Houston Media Source. In the studio tonight, we have, as guests with us tonight, from my left, we have Mr. Izzy Torres of Cienfuegos. We also have next to him Dean Becker with Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. And right in front of me, we have Orlando Lara with Cienfuegos and also a professor of Mexican-American Studies. We're here tonight to talk about prison reform. In this country, in the last 3 months, well, 3 months ago, the government released 12 individuals from the Bureau of Prisons for nonviolent drug offenses. About 3 weeks ago, they released 46. Now, I sat down and talked with the director of Bureau of Prisons almost 3 months ago, and he told me personally that this is a move by the government to build up to releasing 6,800 individuals from the Bureau of Prisons November 1st. Now, he told me this, and I did some investigation, and he made this same statement to Congress. So this is coming. Now, they're doing it in dribs and drabbles because this is a very politically charged issue. Politicians have been running on a tough on crime platform for years in this country, and they're afraid if they're seen as soft on crime by supporting this, that they may not be able to keep their comfortable jobs in Washington. That being the case, the administration is sneaking up on this, but it is coming. Charles Samuels, the director of the Bureau of Prisons, told me personally that the system as it exists cannot sustain itself. The Bureau of Prisons costs the Department of Justice 30% of its budget every year, and it's getting more expensive. So this is coming. What a lot of people don't realize is that in the Federal Bureau of Prisons, the rates of incarceration for drug offenders is 35% of the total. The rates of incarcerated for immigrant law is 30%. So we're talking about 65% of all inmates at the federal level fall in those two categories. We're going to talk with Dean and with Orlando about the impact of these laws on their communities and how it fits overall in this move that both of them are making to change these laws and how it may impact the incarceration rates at the federal level in this country. I, for one, believe that you can let people out early, but what we really have to concentrate on is not putting them in the first place. Now, on my left is Izzy Torres. Izzy's a former ICE detainee. But before we get into Izzy and Orlando's issues here, I would like to talk to Dean Becker about the drug laws in this country and the impact they're having, the overall impact they're having on the country and the direct impact they're having on incarceration rates in this country. Good evening, Dean.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you for joining us.
Mike, I want to say this. The impact on the prison industrial complex, many people call it, is driven by the drug war. It is driven by immigration status of people. It's driven by fear, mostly. It's driven by the idea that these people are just not to be trusted, better that they be locked up. But more and more politicians Democrat, Republican, across the board, are beginning to speak against this. Our president, he came on a week or so ago talking about $80 billion a year we're spending, that we can no longer afford to incarcerate so many people, etc. Rand Paul has done the same. Chris Christie, even though he's against marijuana, says that we are incarcerating too many people. He wants to provide more treatment rather than incarceration. I want to read a little something I picked up today. 2.3 million. That's the number of Americans we now have incarcerated behind bars, state, federal, and local. That's more than the population of New Mexico, Nebraska, West Virginia, Idaho, Vermont, Montana, Hawaii, Maine, and New Hampshire put together. That's how many people we have behind bars. That's more than the number of Americans in the armed forces. We have more jails and prisons than we do universities. It has become an obsession to America, and it's time to focus on. I can speak to my part of it. I've investigated this drug war for 15 years, first for the New York Times, now for Pacifica Radio, KPFT here in Houston. And I wrote a book. I want to read a little bit from it. It's been more than 40 years since President Nixon declared the U.S. war on drugs in 1971 to, quote, go after the blacks without appearing to do so. It's now more than 50 years since the United Nations declared they would eliminate drugs from planet Earth within 5 years. 50 years later, after their 5-year plan. Truthfully, though, the drug war is more than 100 years old. It began with its war on a select few plant products and with the passage of the Opium Exclusion Act, which went after Chinese who were smoking opium while the white folks were taking their opium in a drink called laudanum. It has no basis in reality, and it's just a means to provide money for one side and misery for the other. And who's going to jail? It comes as no surprise. The overwhelming majority of those arrested are black, then Latinos, then whites, and it's nearly always the poor. People who can't afford a lawyer or who live in neighborhoods where cops focus their efforts. And this all happens despite the fact that rich white folks use drugs at about the same rate as do blacks or Hispanics. Over the lifetime of the drug war, more than 45 million nonviolent citizens of America have been arrested for little baggies of plant products in their pocket. And, you know, this is, I don't know how to say it, it's an outrage which is being exposed. As we talk, there are more and more politicians, pretty much the same, Chris Christie, Cory Booker, President Obama, our ex-Attorney General Eric Holder. Many people with great stature are now saying, we have done this wrong, we have to find a better way. And, you know, they all talk about lessening the sentences, and I would suggest maybe we don't arrest so many people for minor amounts of drugs. If we're so upset, pour it out in the street and send them on their way. But each day here in Houston, we arrest 100 people for marijuana. Not each day, I'm sorry, each month we arrest 1,000 people here in Harris County for marijuana, little baggies that they could write a ticket for, but they choose to fill the jail. And once again, the jail is so overcrowded, they're shipping people to they're busing them to other counties to remain constitutionally, appropriate. So I would urge the listeners out there, the viewers, to just consider this. It could be your son, your daughter. They could just be riding in a car with somebody who has that bag of marijuana or that little bit of cocaine or whatever it might be. It could ruin your child's future. It could prevent them from getting credit, housing, education. It can stifle their future quite severely. And for what? Drugs are cheaper, purer, more freely available than ever before. The cartels in Mexico are making billions of dollars each year because we're so fearful of these drugs. And it's just a matter of how many people do we want to lock up? There's been more than 100 million Americans busted for drugs already. It is a preposterous notion, and it's just something that shouldn't go forward for another minute. Now, here's something I picked up today. The prison system is beyond capacity, $80 billion a year. Based on the most recent statistics, nearly half of the population behind bars in state prisons, serving time for nonviolent offenses, and many are serving lengthy sentences because of mandatory minimums, which were put in place back with Clinton and even the first Bush administration. That, the people get caught for shoplifting and or maybe a small theft or a minor drug charge, but that third charge leads to a mandatory minimum, which has given people sentences of 10, 20, 30, and life for truly minor infractions of the law. And we've just gotten so paranoid and delusional that our prisons are, it's just outrageous. I don't know what else to add here except we know the truth of this matter. So many people know somebody who does a little bit of drugs or had done some drugs, and it didn't impact their life as severely as the government thinks it does or would or could. It's just a paranoid and delusional jihad we have against people who use drugs. Meanwhile, tobacco kills 450,000 people a year, alcohol 100,000 when you include the traffic accidents. Pharmaceutical pills have now overtaken the death toll from cocaine and heroin. And of course, marijuana has never killed anybody, and yet we arrest 1,000 people every month right here in this city because we're still paranoid and delusional, living 100 years ago in reefer madness. Reduced prison sentences for drug offenses can help achieve cost savings. In Texas, for example, funding alternatives to incarceration have allowed the state to produce over $3 billion in savings over the last decade, including the closure of 3 prisons, all while keeping crime at the lowest rate since 1968. Now, I want to just close out with this thought here. To summarize, my position is that our criminal justice system is too often criminal itself in the way it denies bond, hides evidence from defense attorneys, compels snitches to lie, and in general does everything to gain a conviction, even when the prosecutors know the accused to be innocent.
Thank you, Dean. I agree. I agree with everything you said. You know what I'm wondering is, what could you give us? And by the way, I need to mention that Dean is has a radio show, a weekly radio show on KPFT called Cultural Baggage. What time is that on Sundays?
Well, it's now on Fridays. On Fridays at 4:30 p.m. Right before Democracy Now, 90.1 FM.
Okay, so if you tune in KPFT 90.1 FM at what time again?
4:30.
4:30 on Fridays. You can hear Dean tell you what kind of movement there is on this move throughout the country to legalize or decriminalize marijuana possession. Could you speak maybe to some of the legislative efforts at the federal and state level in different states, and how's that going?
Well, there's a lot of bluster and a lot of, standing at the pulpit saying need for change. Very little is in gear as yet. The viewer might remember this past legislative session here in Texas. There were like 8 or 12 bills put forward to change our drug laws.
Right.
And all of them were slowly cast aside. They made it through one committee, but not through the second committee. One made it through, was voted upon. It's a medical cannabinoid law. The CBD oil, the non-intoxicating oil, was going to be allowed to be used in Texas after a 1.5-year study and a secondary approval from the legislature. But the real stumbling block they put into it was that it required a doctor to prescribe marijuana, which is illegal at the federal level. If a doctor were to prescribe marijuana, he would lose his license to prescribe any of these controlled substances. So it was a pretend effort. The only good thing that came out of that was the idea that the Texas legislature said that marijuana is medicine. And that's about all we got out of it. But at the federal level, there are indications the Senate is going to do something. A couple of bills are being put forward to lower the sentences, rather than 10, 20, or 30 years, make it 2 or 5. And again, these are for people that, compared to the overall flow of drugs around the world, are less than a drop in the bucket. It's just another means to say these people are scary and we need to lock them up. When the truth be told, nearly every adult has done, I'd say the majority of adults has done some sort of illegal drug, taken a pill from a friend when they had a headache or a hurt, smoked a little marijuana, or otherwise used drugs, quote, illegally. And it's just the ones that happen to get caught go to prison.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dean. And you're right. There are 3 laws currently pending at the federal level. One limits the amount of mandatory minimums.
Yes.
Another one decreases it. And another one actually gives judges judicial discretion to decide if they want to impose mandatory minimums or not. That's at the federal level, I know. Have you studied the effect of the legalization of marijuana on incarceration rates and overall in Colorado and some of these states that have legalized it? What kind of impact is it having on these states to legalize this drug?
It's still somewhat early, over a year in Colorado, and now we're getting Oregon and a couple of other states involved. Washington, D.C. in particular has come forward to legalize it. They're maybe going to allow for dispensaries here soon, I hear. But in Colorado, where the most study has been done, where it's been in place the longest, they're finding that the rate of nonviolent crimes is actually going down. They're finding that the initial use by children of marijuana is going down. It no longer has that rebellious nature. It doesn't have that attraction. And they're also finding that the use of prescription medications is going down, because that's the nature of medical marijuana. It allows you to either eliminate or diminish your use of these, pain pills, oxy pills or whatever. The compound use of both tends to mean you can use less of both as well. So initial indications are quite good.
All right, Dean, appreciate that. It's interesting, at the federal level, there are a lot of problems related to prisons, to running prisons. The government, I've already been talking about, the governor's concerned about the cost. And, don't get this wrong. They're letting people out of prison early, not because of any humanitarian interest. Money drives this whole thing. Right. At the federal level, in the year 2000, it cost $21,000, a little better, to incarcerate a person for a year. 12 years later, in 2012, the figure had moved up to $27,600. It had increased by over $6,000. And in the Federal Bureau of Prisons budget, the biggest cost is salaries. And because of them not being able to maintain these prisons and build more prisons because they don't have the money, they're experiencing overcrowding at the federal level. I think you mentioned that, Dean.
Yes.
And the main impact of that is the inmate to corrections officer ratio is going up. So they're getting less oversight on these people that are in prisons. There are a tremendous amount of problems at the federal level. Before the drug war kicked off in earnest, and before the federal government decided to detain and incarcerate so many undocumented immigrants, the federal population of inmates in this country in 1980 was 25,000. Okay, by 2012 it was 219,000. I think it's hovering around 212 now.
Right.
But it increased in those 32 years, 1,000% almost.
Yeah, and that's just an example of this paranoia that really existed in the early 80s to the early 90s, that just, maybe it was a leverage point for politicians to recruit votes. We're going to be tough on these guys. We're going to, lock them all up. But it was a means to attract voters, which is what it really started from. It was, as I mentioned earlier, Nixon was wanting to go after the blacks without appearing to do so, but he was using it as a ploy to reach those people who hated blacks, to let them know that he was going to get them and put them away.
Keep them under control.
Yes, yes, and that's still in play. Those people who put forward those ideas, those people who voted on those ideas, those people who stood forth, they can't back down now. They can't say, "Oh, I was wrong. We shouldn't have put those tens of millions."
Well, that's why this tentative move to releasing people early.
But it's young people who didn't say all that stuff back when.
It's coming. Thank you, Dean.
Sure.
Tonight in the studio we have two members of Sin Huelas, and we have a short video clip that we'd like to run. If we could get Mark to go ahead and run that now, please.
La libertad se ha convertido en el país de las deportaciones, which means the country of liberty has turned into the country of deportations.
Detention Nation is a show about our nation's immigration policies. What it demonstrates is how detainees are incarcerated without due process. And that's one of the things that we want people to walk away with, understanding that we're talking about a population that has not been offered their human rights.
In the past 20 years, starting in 1982, around the time when I was born, the Houston Processing Center, it's sort of like the grandfather of all private detention centers. This is where the experiment began. And now it's ballooned to 365 private detention centers all across the country. And so it's really becoming part of our American identity now, this sort of locking immigrants up, housing them for as long as we can to make as much money off of them as we can, and then ultimately deporting them.
One of the things that we found very difficult is that one can't get inside a detention center. It's closed to the public. How do you kind of explain something that you really can't see? The only way that we could interact is through the letters that you see on the walls, and reading those letters and interviewing people that had been inside. And from all of that information, we were able to recreate the feelings, the anxieties, the tensions that the detainees faced while they were inside the detention centers.
We worked with families over a period of a year, and so we felt that by addressing these needs, by bringing in these voices and allowing them to tell their story, it was possible for us to be able to say their stories are valid and something needs to be changed, and also the community at large has a right to know what's happening behind this barbed wire.
One of the letters, the detainees wrote Conroe, Texas, and then he crossed it out, and then he said El Infierno, Texas. We were trying to recreate that sense of hell that they have, that even though it's like very institutional, emotionally, it's still an infierno. Detainees keep using that word over and over.
So what we wanted to do is just kind of like suggest all of those things inside of the exhibition, so that when people came in, they began to understand, what kind of crisis that we're talking about in terms of people being dehumanized. And so in the show itself, you don't necessarily see, a documentary representation of those people that have been incarcerated within the detention centers. But what you feel is you feel their presence, and really that's what we were trying to go for, is that tension and the dehumanization that they feel once they're incarcerated into these detention centers.
This is the first time that our art collective has presented in a museum space. Usually these are stories that end up being told in someone's home, to the media, on social media even, but to have it actually at a museum allows us to spread the message to an audience that we normally don't encounter. But it is also one aspect of where these stories need to be told.
Thank you, Mark. That video we just watched, Orlando, could you give us a background of what that obviously was at a local museum? Could you tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll talk to Izzy and come back to you. But what was that we just saw?
What was that? That was a show called Detention Nation. It was part of a kind of a larger exhibit at the Station Museum of Contemporary Art. The whole show was called Degrees of Separation. It dealt with different social issues in Houston. We were invited to take part in that show. And I, along with Di Trevino, who's my partner, who was interviewed in that video, and a lot of other local activists here in Houston for the past year and a half, 2 years, had been working on deportation defense cases, working directly with people like Israel who were facing deportation and had tried working with lawyers that spent all their money giving it away to lawyers and had no other recourse but to take their cases public and get.
So that's where this video originated.
Yeah, so that's
that effort.
From all that work, we had this opportunity to show, to bring those stories, to bring those images into museum space. At the same time, while we were doing this work, there's a major hunger strike by detainees in Conroe, Texas. And so a lot of those letters came through interacting with those detainees and just hearing from them and hearing their cases. And they wanted to make big changes. It wasn't just about get me out of here. It was stop trying us twice for the same crime, stop separating our families. The things that the sort of rights that citizens have access to, but when it comes to undocumented immigrants, we kind of follow a different law.
Well, are there plans to make to enlarge on that video? I mean, that was good stuff, but are there plans to make a longer feature-length documentary? 20 minutes, 90 minutes?
I would love to. And I think Israel is a great, would be a great subject for that, especially right now that his case is very urgent. He'll talk more about that.
Good. Yeah, I wanted to get to him. I'll get back to you, Orlando. To my left, to my direct left here is Israel Torres. Well, I'll let him tell you. Can you tell us, Izzy, about your experience with ICE and about your life in the U.S. and how it's been impacted by the immigration laws and how it's impacted the life of your family?
Yes, sir. Well, my name is Sergio Torres. Nice to meet you all. Thanks for the opportunity. My name is Sergio Torres. I've been here in the United States since 1986, which is 29 years old. 29 years ago, I came to this country. I've been working, to get a better life to me and my family. Unfortunately, I made a mistake to trust a law enforcement department, in this case, the sheriff department. And I trusted them. I tried to cooperate with them by filling up an application. So I for a license, so I lost my job because that's a long story. So I was told that we trust the law enforcement because that's what they say. They say that if you are honesty is the best policy. But in this case, it backfired on me. What happened after I filled up the application and I was asked to cooperate and be trusted, they put charges on me. They did federal felonies against me because of the use of Social Security number. So I was arrested at my house in a brutal, incredible abuse. There were like 20 agents coming to my house.
Kicked down the door.
Yeah, my wife, she was coming out of surgery. She had kidney stone surgery, so she was pushed out of the way. I got guns pointed at me. I was sitting still at our table. I finished my dinner. My daughter came out of her room saying what's going on, and she got guns pointed at her too. So it was something real unrealistic. It was a clear case of police brutality. Mm-hmm. So I was handcuffed, taken outside, and I saw like 20 cops coming to pick me up. And I don't have any violent record at all. So I think it was way too much. It was the way I was ripped off my family, taken away from my family. So I was wondering how much money, it costs to the taxpayer to do those kind of raids on a person that does not have any criminal record. I did not have it, no violent, nothing. So I went to the system. I was sentenced to 1 year because, like Orlando was saying, we are perfect targets, the immigrants, because nobody cares about us. We don't have no voice at Congress or anywhere. So we're perfect targets. And sometimes the lawyers take money from us, making false promises, and they never fill up those promises. I spent a lot of money on attorneys. Lawyers tell me they want to get me out of prison, and at the end, I was a couple minutes to be deported from this country. So my experience during the my stay at the sheriff department, it was bad because I don't feel like I didn't belong there because I'm a family man. I work hard. I pay my taxes. All my crime was to use a Social Security number that millions of people had done it before.
Right.
Just to keep my job. That was my crime. And then after that, I spent 4 months on the sheriff department jail. I was picked up by immigration, where I spent like a month and a half. But the condition on the prisons and immigration, they are really bad. They're terrible. You are abused, neglected, and they don't really care about the people that's inside. They are inside. Like
now, are these ICE facilities? Are they all privately run
Yeah, in
prisons.
this case, I was in CCA of Houston.
The
Yeah.
majority now. There's a few that are federal, like the ones that are run by the marshals, but the grand majority are private. Yeah.
Okay, and what were the conditions there like?
Well, the condition there, they're really bad. I mean, like per se, the food is really bad. They give you bread with mold. Our containers we bought, they have the water is always dirty, or they have you can see stuff floating inside. I would say it was like slime. They used to feed us chicken every weekend, every Sunday. Read a little piece of the chicken, and you see blood still coming out of it. And you don't have the right to say anything. If you say something, you complain, they take you. They take you to the hole. They call it the hole. Yeah, I remember one time that we were complaining because it was back then. It was November and it was really cold. When we were going to take showers, the water was really cold, like ice cold. So we all got together and complained, and yeah, they fixed the problem. But guess what we did? They put extremely hot. It was like literally steam coming out of the shower. It burns you. It burned. But still we had to deal with it. We did the best we can. A lot of people got sick, and if I got sick on a Friday, I had to wait till Monday to see a doctor. So things like that. Yeah, we were mistreated by the security officers from CCA, and if you write a letter to our ICE, in this case our deporting officers, they never answer. I never get to talk to that guy. I never met him. So basically, you are there on your own. I mean, it's really bad. It's really bad.
Yeah, I understand that the Bureau of Prisons has 118 facilities in 35 states, and like Orlando said, most of the ICE facilities are privately run prisons. Now, when did you get out, Izzy?
Well, I got out in December 4th in 2013.
Okay, and I understand you're going through something now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I mean, I got a chance to get out, but I was let out to to fight my case, to make my appeal going, but they only gave me a year and a half. So right now my appeal was denied. But in exchange to let me out, they put this ankle monitor on me, like a GPS of where they know where I am 24 hours a day.
So they know you're here right now, huh?
Yeah, they know I'm here. They're probably watching me somewhere. But yeah, but believe me, I mean, I see the idea of this, I don't know what they're thinking, because I'm fighting for me to remain in the country.
Right.
Because after all these years, I had no home. This is my home.
Your family's here.
My family's here. My mom, my brothers, my sisters, my wife, my kids. Where am I gonna go? I mean, I don't see. I mean, it's senseless. Why they do this process? I'm going to stay here. I'm not gonna run away.
Right.
So, but this is the condition, and I accepted it, and I'm still here, but I'm still fighting. I'm still facing deportation. Yes, sir.
Well, keep fighting, Izzy. And that is a problem with the judicial system in general here. It's designed to take money from poor people.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I've been looking at it. I almost got run over by a tow truck the other night. They were racing to get to some kind of police scene so they could tow the car. And I was thinking about it. Bondsmen in this country make a tremendous amount of money bonding people out of jail. There's only 2 countries in the world that use the system we use for bonding people out of jail. That's the United States and the Philippines, believe it or not. Nobody else uses this system. It's corrupt to its core. The record companies, if they tow your car, if they tow my car and I'm a working man on a Tuesday, by the time I get paid on Friday, I probably don't have enough money to get the car, and they keep it. And they sell it, and they make money. It's big business.
Happens all the time with drug busts. Same thing.
The same thing. CCA is making a lot of money.
Oh, yeah.
Geo is making a lot of money. Aramart is making a lot of money. The phone companies are making a lot of money. A lot of people don't realize it, but there are over 200 corporations in this country that use convict leasing. Not only that, and that includes immigrant labor. There was a case where in Alabama, ICE wanted to deport 40 or 50 immigrants. And the prison asked them to put it off for a couple months because they would lose 49 jobs. You know, this is about money.
Yes,
This is
yes.
all about, it's driven by money. I say we have tremendous injustice in this country because the wealthy don't mind.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't affect them, and they actually get dividends from it.
Yeah, they make money.
Thank you, Izzy. I appreciate it.
Oh, one more note that I could probably, if I may.
Yeah.
I also heard about this 8-hour shift working in the kitchen where the inmates were making $1
Yeah.
per 8-hour shifts. I mean, who is the abuser here? Who is using the cheap labor? I mean, and they're complaining for being here illegally and making some kind of money, and they're making money off illegal people like me.
The thing is, it's true in a lot of prisons where they have workers, heck, building computers or destroying computers or doing any kind of physical task. And yes, they may make $1 that day for an 8-hour shift. And then the commissary will take that $1 for a candy bar.
Exactly.
You know, it's
And it's
Yeah,
funny if you look at the
slavery. Slavery at its finest.
Yeah.
Slavery.
Right.
It's
You're
contemporary
exactly right.
slavery, and the irony with the immigrant detainees is that they're not doing time for a crime. So the way they sort of got around being able to pay civil detainees $1 is to basically make the claim that they don't work for a legitimate industry. That was the legal court case.
yeah.
And it's so the immigration law is full of these sort of like Orwellian, these sort of counterintuitive. Another example, the way someone like Izzy can be deported after they've already served time in jail, or this happens a lot, that someone served a drug conviction 10 years ago, they're a resident now, they go on vacation, they come back, and at the airport, they get screened through secure communities, and now 20 years later, they're deportable.
Because of that ancient drug bust.
Because of that ancient drug bust and because of the change in immigration law. I lost my mic. And so they're allowed to be, immigrants are allowed to be punished twice, 3, 4, 5 times for the same crime.
Put it back on,
Yeah.
Orlando.
And it's and part of the way they get away with that is that deportation has been defined as not a punishment. It's not a punishment. So
Yeah, I understand that. You know, interestingly, at the federal level, they have it's supposed to be government-owned corporation called Unicor.
Yes.
And they do a lot of different jobs. Some of it light industrial stuff, and they sell products. And still, the federal government is losing money on the Bureau of Prisons. So it doesn't work, you know, and that actually, to me, that's a bright spot in potential immigration law changes and potential drug law changes. Because, like the Bureau of Prisons director told me, the system as it is now is not sustainable. So I think we're at a pretty good place here if we just keep pushing. And I'm interested, Orlando, about Cinejuelas and what you guys are doing as an organization to affect the situation that undocumented workers are going through in this country right now, and how it's impacting everything you guys do. You know, talk about Cinejuelas to us for a
I think
little
since it's a artist activist collective, our main role is in changing the narrative, changing the conversation and the imagery that gets used. And the immigrant rights movement has sort of shackled itself a little bit for the past 20 years, 10 years, in that it's tried to make the case that immigrants, undocumented immigrants, need to earn citizenship. They sort of need to prove themselves. And in order to prove themselves, they have to make the case that they're sort of like angelic figures that have never, that they're not human beings.
That they're not
angels.
human,
They're
right,
not human
right,
beings. And since we make that case, and making that case, we really kind of reject the reality of the population, that some of our population has made mistakes. in the past. Or sometimes the change in criminal law has expanded what it means to be a criminal so wide that you can also be defined as a criminal for simply using a fake social, right? And so, or having a tiny bit of marijuana or whatever other drug. So we're really trying to sort of include all undocumented immigrants in the conversation. Adult men, for example, not just women and children, because in the past year there was a mass influx of women and children, and that was great. It really kind of expanded the movement. A lot of people for the past year have been working very hard to get the ICE and the Obama administration to stop detaining women and children. But at the same time, it became a little bit easy to forget about the men and the fathers. So what we wanted to do is to say all of those lives matter, whether or not they have perfect records or not. No human being, not only is no human being illegal, but no human being is a criminal. To me, that idea of the criminal is a cultural idea. We think of it as a legal category, but in fact, it's a character judgment that we put on people for whatever reason, and it has really nothing to do with the law. It has to do with our culture, really kind of a punitive culture that goes all the way back to Reconstruction, the Civil War, the treatment of people of color. And so we're trying to change that. We're trying to include everyone and to say every life matters.
Could I throw something in here? You mentioned the influx last year, a lot of women and children. They were coming, a lot of them, not from Mexico, but from Guatemala, Honduras, where those barbarous cartels were cutting off people's heads, stacking bodies in the street, just butchering people. And those children were being recruited. They were being brought into those gangs with the threat of death of themselves and or their family. And the mothers decided, let's get those kids out of here. That's why they rode those trains north. That's why we had, 60,000 children came across the border last year, escaping that drug war violence.
Exactly.
And then now they've been proclaimed to be bad actors or whatever, unworthy of escaping this hellhole in their home countries. And I just kind of wanted to show there is a big tie-in there.
There's a huge tie-in, and that's I think the key point. Why I'm so happy that you're doing this show, because on the one hand, where in making that case that immigrants are clean, pure, and that's why they deserve citizenship, we miss all these intersections with the prison industrial complex. We miss all these intersections with the war on drugs. That is essentially what destabilized our home countries and why so many people are coming. So we're so intertwined, these movements, that they need to work together, and I think on our end we need to kind of let go of that good immigrant, bad immigrant narrative and really look at the actual systems that are being used to detain and deport and incarcerate millions of people.
That's an excellent point. And it brings up a question I have, this overlap in the laws and how it affects poorer people. Somebody with a little bit of marijuana can be driving down the road and have a taillight out, and because of having a little bit of marijuana ends up going to jail, if not to prison.
Yeah.
And somebody like Izzy that's been working hard his whole life, he's driving down the road and with a taillight burnout, and he gets pulled over and they start digging into things, and all of a sudden he's liable to go to prison. It seems like the same thing is happening to both groups of people. We've become targets for, I don't want to say prosecution so much as persecution. And that is a wonderful point, that we need to learn how to work together, because maybe we're not so different.
Yeah. And what you described is exactly what happened to David Vasquez, who was actually one of the main hunger strike leaders at Conroe. He was in a car and they were stopped because of, I think they said, a broken taillight, something like that, and the constable found like small grams of I think it was like 0.5 grams something of cocaine. And for immigration purposes, it doesn't matter how small that little percentage is, you're already deportable. And so that goes all the way back to 1996, to the Clinton administration, to IRA, to all that sort of fervor in 96 that started all the way with Reagan, but sort of like Clinton just kind of pushed it forward. And it was really that was a watershed year where these kind of the laws that we're dealing with now sort of happened for both movements, where the number of deportable offenses was dramatically increased. They invented a category called the aggravated felony, which is a whole list of crimes that for the state isn't a felony, but for immigration law, it's now a felony. And so David Vasquez was exactly in that situation. He was a victim of these drug laws, and the in one way in which immigrants have an even harder time is that they don't have a right to an attorney. So they become victims of the same deferred adjudication laws that confuse everybody else, get them to take these plea bargains that they think, okay, I'm gonna at least not be in jail. But for immigrants, they come to find out later, oh, even though they didn't put me in jail, they can still deport me.
Right.
And all of a sudden,
And if they leave the country, they can't get back.
yeah,
Right.
and all of a sudden they're sitting at home going through their whole probation. This is what happened to David Vasquez. They're completing their probation terms. All of a sudden, ICE comes to their house because they're still deportable under immigration law. So it's our community is suffering
Well,
from these laws.
I have a question about one of these laws, Proposition 287G. Now, I understand there's some kind of discretion given to local law enforcement, whether to call ICE or not. And I also understand that Harris County is one of the few jurisdictions to where ICE is called a lot. Do you have any
Insight on that,
information,
yeah.
insight?
Yeah, and this is exactly why I think Izzy is a great person to have on here, because he was a victim of 287G and of the ICE and law enforcement collaboration. He was picked up by sheriffs, and he served time in the Harris County Jail, and then through the 287G program was transferred immediately to ICE, as opposed to being let out after having served his time. And this is why I kind of keep bringing up 1996 era. 287G is actually a little segment of that Immigration Reform and Control Act. And it didn't really start to get enforced. This clause that basically says that local law enforcement can share information with federal immigration authorities. It didn't really start to gain traction and get put into effect until after 9/11. But the groundwork for it was laid by the Clinton administration.
So I'm sorry, what year was that law was passed?
Era is 1996.
1996. Now, am I correct that prior to that, the average number of folks in detention for immigration issues was around 8,000, and now it's pushing 35,000?
35,000, because now there's a bed quota. I'm not sure exactly where the bed quota came out of, if it was also from era, but it's basically another section of law that says that ICE can maintain up to 34,000 immigrant detainees at one time. They've taken it as a charter, as a sort of like, you have to have 34,000 at any one time. So what ends up happening is that ICE sort of keeps that maximum at the maximum.
So it's resulted in 20 years in an increase of almost 500% of people detained by ICE.
Exactly.
Gosh, it does have striking parallels to what's happened in the drug
It does.
war.
It does. I was going to say, you were pointing out how, well, here in Houston, the sheriff works pretty directly with ICE.
Right.
You go to Austin, it's not so true.
Right.
And there's some parallels I wanted to bring up here. One, in Houston, your chance of getting the public recognizance bond is about 5%. 95% of the time, they're going to require a bond. You go to Austin, your chance of getting that PR bond is 95%. It depends on who's in charge and which way they're focusing on what happens, even at that disparity between counties here in Texas.
Exactly. And so there's a lot of actors here for immigrants. There's the district attorney here in Houston and Harris County is really notorious for offering immigrants terrible plea bargains.
Yeah, like mine.
And and not negotiating with immigrants, with keeping in mind that there's more consequences for them down the line, which is how district attorneys are supposed to take into account that these are immigrants and they could get deported. They sort of just kind of ignore that, and nobody tells them. Their attorneys often don't tell them that if you take this plea bargain, 1 year from now you'll be deported.
Yeah, that seems to be something this county and the police here are fond of doing. I understand in the drug war that they also have the option to what they call catch and release. But a lot of times they catch and they take to jail, but they have the option, under a certain amount to let you go or take you to jail, but they almost always decide to take you to jail. But I'm involved in community organizing, and I realized a long time ago that people, I don't know how to say it, people just don't care. They don't care about the number of people being incarcerated. They don't care about their family. They don't care families of these people or even their children. Even though they might pay lip service and say, oh yes, that's a terrible thing, they're not going to get involved. And what I was wondering is, undocumented workers, do you get any kind of support from the Hispanic community that may be citizens here? Is there any tie-in between you guys? Does anybody in the Hispanic community care about undocumented workers?
I think they do. I think they do. It's unfortunately we have very short-term memory. So, for example, Adrian Garcia is now running for mayor, and he's getting a lot of support in the Latino community. Maybe because we haven't done a good enough job of really emphasizing how he was central to the rise of 287G in Harris County, and
right.
He actually advocated for it at the national level, and so I don't think not enough, definitely not enough. But I think that's one of the reasons that we decided to take the approach of working with families who were directly affected, who were being deported, because at that point you kind of have to care. Right, and I think Izzy could talk about how his family was actually instrumental in getting him released. Ultimately, it wasn't a legal document. It was, it was involved. This family asked for prosecutorial discretion, but the only way you get that is through a public campaign, through petitions, through media pressure.
Let's hear from Israel. What did your family do to help you get released?
Well, first of all, after, we lost most of the family, we had saved, on runaway attorneys that never kept their promises. We were fortunate enough, we were blessed enough to find people like Orlando, like Hope Sanford, like Di Trevino, like Ivan Sanchez, people that work for the community, and they never charged anything for it. I mean, that would be... Back then, we make a lot of mistakes because we didn't know, because we never think that's going to happen to us. But after that, my wife, she was like, heartbroken. My family, went through a lot. We lost, I lost my car. I lost, things that my wife cannot afford it because she only have a job, and I was the main source of our income. But we found these wonderful people, these real heroes, these real life heroes. They are the one that help us out. And through my experience now, I want to be like them. I want to get involved with the community, help the people that cannot, help themselves. And that's my commitment to them right now. But yeah, we went through a lot. There were days that my wife had no food to offer for our kids. Yeah, we went through a lot. It's still going. It's still, we're still fighting. Fighting ain't over. But now I can see more. The picture clearer. I talk to people about it. Don't get in trouble, please. Don't be careful with this. Be careful with that. That's the way that I'm trying to repay for all these wonderful people did for me.
I think that's...
Try to educate other people.
I think
based on my experience.
I think that's wonderful, Izzy.
Good perspective.
Yes, sir.
We have just a few minutes left. Is there anything you'd like to address before we wrap up here?
Yeah, just the question about caring. I tend to think of it more in terms of people are so saturated with just a basic struggle of living in themselves.
That's my experience as well.
That they have a hard time caring about anything else, and I don't really judge them for it. I think it's kind of part of the economic system we're in that kind of leads you to just think about yourself and at most your own family. But I think that one comment that came out of the exhibit that I had to think about a lot is that people would say, they would walk in and say, this looks pretty bad, but I was in jail before, and this is how they treat people in jail. Right? And so therefore it's not a big deal. Right? We treat citizens as bad. It's not bad that we treat immigrants this way, right? And I think it is important to move towards saying it's not okay to treat citizens this way, and it's not okay to treat immigrants this way. So to me, a lot of the key is sort of decriminalizing this criminal category, so that it's not okay to treat anyone like this in this country anymore.
Okay.
I agree. I agree.
America is not leading the pack in this regard. You go to Europe, visit their prisons. I mean, they have sinks and a kitchen in a lot of the prisoners' cells. You know
I
what
agree,
I'm
and
saying?
this may be a topic for another show, but we're just about to run out of time,
All right, Mike.
Dean. And I'd like to, before we close, I'd like to thank each of my guests, each of you. I appreciate you coming out here
Thank you,
and
Mike.
taking part in this discussion. And there's lots more, and we're working with HMS TV right now to get more time. I'd like to thank the HMS TV for the time that they've provided us. I'd like to thank Marilee Armstrong for her research on some of these facts and figures I pulled up, and our leader at En Masse Incarceration, Ray Hill. And once again, thank you all for coming and joining us tonight.
Thank you. Thank
Did
you.
well,
This is
Ray.
Mike Allen. We appreciate you joining us tonight, and hopefully you've learned something. You can go to, what is your Facebook page? Or?
It's Sin Huellas Collective on Facebook, and that's where we'll have more information about Izzy. ICE wants him to deport himself August 12th, so
Oh, goodness.
there's a community here that's ready to
Okay.
keep him
Stand
here.
with you.
If you're interested in helping, go to that website. Our Facebook page is En Masse Incarceration Houston, Facebook. Dean, do you have a web page that they can reach you at?
Yes, I've got more than 7,000 radio shows online at drugtruth.net.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Get involved. You know, it's one thing to say you care, but it's another thing to actually do something. So remember, nothing will change in this country until we change ourselves. The change starts with me, and it starts with you. Like Izzy was saying, we need to stand up and take part in our brothers' freedom, because human dignity and human rights is a personal matter to each and every one of us. What they take from one today, they will get around to taking from all. So have a good night, and good night.